So, I got something super cool for you today on Behind the Billions. We're talking about a guy who literally changed the game of investing and still lives in the same house he bought back in 1958 for 31,500.
Oh my God, yes. Warren Buffett is just absolutely fascinating. Did you know he started his first business when he was just 6 years old, selling gum door to door? And now he's like worth over $150 billion, making him one of the richest people on the planet,
Wait, seriously? 6 years old? I was still eating glue at 6.
right? And what's crazy is that this guy from Omaha, Nebraska, who really doesn't fit the billionaire stereotype at all, has become known as the Oracle of Omaha because of his absolutely incredible ability to pick winning investments.
What gets me is how, normal he seems. He drives his own car, eats at McDonald's for breakfast, and drinks like 5 cherry Cokes every day.
Totally. And despite all that wealth, he's pledged to give away 99% of his fortune to charity. Like, who does that? The same guy who still uses coupons and until recently had a flip phone instead of a smartphone?
I'm so excited to dive into his story today. How did this seemingly ordinary guy become such an extraordinary investor and businessman? So, let's talk about little Warren's childhood. I mean, where did this investing genius actually come from?
Yeah, so Warren Edward Buffett was born on August 30th, 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska. And his father, Howard, was actually a stockbroker who later became a U.S. congressman. That financial influence was like all around him from day one.
Interesting. So he was basically born into the world of investing?
Exactly. And what's amazing is how early he showed interest. His dad would bring home stock market reports and Warren would analyze stock charts as a little kid. He actually told his dad at age 10 that he wanted to make money his life's work, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Most kids that age are just trying to figure out how to not eat their vegetables. What kind of stuff was he doing as a kid?
Oh my God, so much. By age 6, he was already selling packs of gum door to door. And when customers would try to buy just one stick, he'd say, "I don't break up packs of gum. You want a pack of gum? You've got to buy the whole pack." Like, he already understood profit margins,
No way. That's incredible business instinct for a kid.
right? And he just kept going. At 11, he bought his first stock, 3 shares of Citi Service preferred for $1.38 each. And get this, he bought 3 for himself and 3 for his sister Doris. The stock dropped immediately to $27, which totally freaked him out. But then it bounced back to $40 and he quickly sold.
Smart move for a beginner.
Well, here's the thing. The stock later shot up to $200. And that early lesson about patience really stuck with him. He's mentioned that experience multiple times as teaching him the value of, holding investments long term.
So he was learning these huge investment lessons before he was even a teenager?
Totally. By 13, he was working as a paperboy for the Washington Post, and he filed his first tax return that year, deducting his bike as a business expense. Then, at 15, he and a friend spent $25 on a used pinball machine, which they placed in a local barber shop. Within months, they owned several machines across Omaha and eventually sold the business for $1,200.
Hold up. So he was running a legitimate business empire before he could even drive?
Exactly. And what's wild is by the time he finished college, he had saved about $9,800, which is like about $130,000 in today's money, just from these side hustles.
Wow. And what about his education? Where did he study?
So he started at Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, but then transferred to the University of Nebraska. The big turning point was when he applied to Harvard Business School and got rejected. Instead, he went to Columbia Business School after discovering that Benjamin Graham taught there.
And who was Benjamin Graham? I've heard that name before.
Oh my God, he's basically the father of value investing. Graham wrote this book called The Intelligent Investor, which Buffett calls the best book on investing ever written. Graham's whole philosophy was about finding companies trading below their intrinsic value, like looking for dollar bills selling for 50 cents. And Buffett was just completely transformed by these ideas.
So Graham became his mentor?
Absolutely. After graduating from Columbia, Buffett actually offered to work for Graham for free, but Graham turned him down. Can you imagine rejecting Warren Buffett? But a few years later, Graham did hire him, and those years working directly under Graham really cemented Buffett's investment approach.
So, after learning from Graham, how did Warren Buffett end up with Berkshire Hathaway? I mean, that's what most people know him for now.
Yeah, so this is actually such a fascinating story because Berkshire Hathaway wasn't even supposed to be his big move. In 1956, Buffett started his own investment partnership with about $105,000 from family and friends. And by 1962, he was already a millionaire from the success of these partnerships.
That's impressive. So, how did the textile company come into the picture?
Well, here's where it gets wild. In 1962, Buffett began buying shares in this struggling textile manufacturer called Berkshire Hathaway. He wasn't actually planning to take it over. He noticed this pattern where the company would occasionally buy back its own shares at a premium, so he'd buy shares when they were cheap and then sell them back to the company for a quick profit.
Sounds like a pretty standard arbitrage play.
Exactly. But then, something happened that changed everything. In 1964, Buffett had a verbal agreement with the CEO, C. Barry Stanton, to sell his shares back at $11.50 per share. But when the official offer came, it was for $11.375 per share.
That's just a tiny difference, though, right?
That's what makes this so crazy. Buffett was so, annoyed by this slight reduction that instead of selling, he decided to buy more shares and take control of the company. He later called it his worst investment ever. He literally said, "I had now committed a major amount of money to a terrible business."
Wait, so one of his greatest achievements started as a move made out of spite?
Totally. And it's wild because he admitted it was an emotional decision that cost him billions in the long run. The textile business was in serious decline due to foreign competition, and Buffett spent years trying to keep those mills running before finally closing the last one in 1985.
So how did he turn this terrible business into one of the world's largest companies?
That's where his genius really shows. Instead of pouring money into the failing textile operations, he used Berkshire as a holding company to buy other businesses. He started with insurance companies, which was brilliant because insurance generates float, essentially free money to invest until claims need to be paid.
I never thought about insurance companies that way.
Right? It's so smart. In 1967, he bought National Indemnity for $8.6 million, and that was really the beginning of the Berkshire we know today. Then he acquired See's Candies in 1972 for $25 million, which has generated over $2 billion in profits since then. He kept finding these amazing businesses with durable competitive advantages.
And when did Charlie Munger enter the picture? I always hear them mentioned together.
So Charlie and Warren actually met in 1959 at a dinner party, but Charlie didn't formally join Berkshire until 1978 as vice chairman. And he was, really crucial to Buffett's evolution as an investor.
How so?
Well, Buffett was purely focused on Graham's approach of buying cheap companies, sometimes not even good businesses. But Munger convinced him that it's better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price. This shift led to investments in companies like Coca-Cola in the late 80s, which just completely transformed Berkshire's performance.
So, essentially, Berkshire became a vehicle for Buffett's investment ideas rather than an actual manufacturer.
Exactly. It's basically Warren Buffett's investment portfolio in corporate form. And what's amazing is how they've built this conglomerate that now owns over 60 companies outright: Geico, Dairy Queen, Duracell, BNSF Railway, plus huge stakes in Apple, Coca-Cola, American Express, Bank of America.
That's really ingenious when you think about it.
It totally is. And what makes it even more impressive is that Buffett gives his company managers incredible autonomy. He's famous for buying great businesses run by great people and then just letting them do their thing. He calls it his hands-off approach, and it's allowed Berkshire to grow way beyond what Buffett could personally manage.
So, let's dig into Buffett's actual investment philosophy. What exactly is value investing, and how does he approach it?
So value investing is basically the idea that you're looking for stocks trading below their intrinsic value. But Buffett's approach goes way deeper than that. I mean, he learned the foundations from Benjamin Graham, right? But he really evolved it into something uniquely his own.
I've heard the term intrinsic value before, but what does that actually mean in Buffett's world?
Okay, so intrinsic value is what Buffett believes a business is actually worth based on its future cash flows, not just what the market says it's worth today. He's looking at the cash a business will generate over its lifetime, and then he's discounting that back to present value. And the big thing is he wants a significant margin of safety between the price he pays and what he thinks the business is worth.
That makes sense. So he's looking for companies on sale, essentially.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. While Wall Street is obsessed with quarterly earnings and short-term price movements, Buffett is thinking in decades. He literally says, our favorite holding period is forever. Like when he bought Coca-Cola in 1988, he wasn't thinking about next quarter's earnings. He was thinking about their global distribution network and brand power over the next 30 years.
That's such a different mindset from how most people invest.
Oh my God, totally. And there are these core principles he follows. First, he only invests in businesses he understands. That's why he avoided tech stocks for so long. He calls it his circle of competence, and he's super disciplined about staying within it.
Is that why he missed out on companies like Google and Amazon early on?
Yeah, 100%. But here's the thing. Buffett doesn't care about missing opportunities. He says, the stock market is a no-called strike game. You don't have to swing at everything. He'll just wait. Sometimes for years until the perfect pitch comes along.
That patience must be incredibly difficult, especially when everyone else is making money on trends.
That's exactly what makes his approach so hard, psychologically. He has this famous quote, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." During the 2008 financial crisis, when everyone was panicking, he was investing billions in Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. But following that advice is so much harder than it sounds.
What else is he looking for in a company?
So Buffett loves businesses with what he calls economic moats, sustainable competitive advantages that protect them from competition. These could be strong brands like Coca-Cola, high switching costs like American Express, or network effects. And he wants businesses with little debt, high returns on equity, and consistent earnings.
And management quality matters too, right?
Oh, huge. He puts enormous emphasis on honest, competent management. He says, in looking for people to hire, look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first, the other two will kill you. The same applies to the companies he invests in.
That's a great quote. What do you think is the biggest misconception about Buffett's approach?
I think people think it's simple, like just buy great companies at good prices and hold forever. But the emotional discipline is incredibly difficult. Most investors can't handle watching others make quick money during bubbles while they sit on the sidelines, or holding steady during market crashes when everyone else is selling. That psychological component it's really what separates Buffett from almost everyone else.
So, Emma, when we look at Buffett's track record, what would you say are some of his most successful investments over the years?
Oh my God, there are so many. But if we're talking about his absolute best, I mean, Coca-Cola has got to be near the top of the list. So back in 1988, right after the market crash, Buffett started buying Coca-Cola shares and spent about $1.3 billion up, which was a huge position at the time.
What made him so confident in Coca-Cola? That's a pretty massive bet.
Well, this is classic Buffett. He understood the product. I mean, he literally drinks like 5 cherry Cokes every day. But more importantly, he recognized that Coca-Cola had this incredible global brand that would be nearly impossible to replicate. He called it an economic moat that protected the business. And he was looking at their international growth potential when most investors were just focused on the US market. That $1.3 billion investment, it's now worth more than $2.5 billion. And Berkshire collects something like $700 million in dividends from it every year. Just insane returns.
That's incredible. Any other investments that stand out?
American Express is another huge winner. So in 1964, Amex was dealing with this massive scandal called the salad oil scandal, where they lost millions. The stock tanked and everyone was selling. But Buffett, true to his be greedy when others are fearful philosophy, saw that the core business was still strong and he invested heavily. That investment has grown I think over 1,600% since then.
He really does buy when there's blood in the streets, doesn't he?
Exactly. And then there's Apple. This one's fascinating because for decades, Buffett avoided tech stocks entirely. But in 2016, he started buying Apple, and now it's Berkshire's largest holding by far. He didn't view it as a tech company, but as a consumer products company with incredible brand loyalty. Berkshire owns about 5.5% of Apple now, and that position has more than tripled in value to over $150 billion.
So what's the common thread in these massive winners?
You know what's interesting is that in every case, Buffett bought these companies when others were pessimistic. With Coca-Cola, it was right after the '87 crash, with American Express during the scandal, and with Apple when everyone thought the iPhone growth story was over.
So it's not just what he buys, but when he buys it.
Right, and his conviction to hold through downturns. Like during the 2008 crisis, Coca-Cola shares fell almost 40%. But Buffett didn't sell a single share. He knew the underlying business wasn't permanently impaired. Most investors panic sell during those moments, but Buffett does the opposite. He either holds or buys more.
Does he ever get it wrong, though?
Oh, for sure. He's made plenty of mistakes. He admits Berkshire Hathaway itself, the textile business, was his worst investment, and he regrets missing out on Amazon and Google. But this is what makes him so remarkable. He doesn't need to be right all the time. He just needs a few big winners and the discipline to hold them for decades. And when he does make a mistake, he's brutally honest about it in his shareholder letters.
It sounds like patience might be his real superpower.
100%. In a world of high-frequency trading and quarterly earnings obsession, Buffett is thinking in terms of decades, not days. And that long-term horizon gives him this incredible advantage that almost no one else has.
Speaking of crises, Emma, the 2008 financial crisis was a pivotal moment for so many investors. How did Buffett handle that period when the entire financial system seemed to be collapsing?
Oh my God, this was Buffett's defining moment in many ways. When everyone else was running for the exits, he was calmly walking in with his checkbook open. It's actually mind-blowing when you think about it.
I remember how terrifying that time was. What specifically did he do?
So, in September 2008, right, Lehman Brothers had just collapsed and the entire financial system was on the brink. Goldman Sachs, which was one of the strongest investment banks, was suddenly in trouble and desperately needed capital. And Buffett, he steps in and invests $5 billion in Goldman Sachs preferred stock with warrants to buy more shares later.
That's a massive bet during such uncertain times.
Absolutely massive. And the terms he got were incredible. Goldman paid him a 10% dividend annually, which is that's $500 million a year just in dividends, plus those warrants to buy Goldman shares at a discount later on. But the real magic wasn't just the investment itself. It was the signal it sent to the market. Basically, if Warren Buffett is investing in Goldman Sachs, maybe the world isn't ending after all.
So he provided more than just capital. He provided confidence.
Exactly. And he didn't stop there. Just a few weeks later, he invested another $3 billion in General Electric on similar terms. GE was struggling to roll over its commercial paper, and Buffett's investment was like this vote of confidence that helped stabilize the situation.
Did these crisis investments work out for him financially?
Oh, they were absolutely home runs. The Goldman deal alone eventually generated more than $3.7 billion in profit. But what's fascinating is what Buffett wrote in the New York Times during the absolute depths of the crisis in October 2008. His op-ed was titled, "Buy American I Am," and he was putting his personal money into U.S. stocks when literally everyone else was panic selling.
What was his reasoning during such a scary time?
He had this great line in the article. He said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful." And he was following his own advice. Buffett understood that, yes, the economy was in serious trouble, but America's best businesses weren't suddenly worth 50% less than they had been a few months earlier. The market was being driven by fear, not rational valuation.
So he saw the crisis as an opportunity rather than a disaster?
Totally. There's this great quote where Buffett compared the financial crisis to a financial Pearl Harbor, but instead of retreating, he went on offense. And this is what separates him from almost everyone else. He had both the emotional temperament to act when others were paralyzed and the financial resources to take advantage of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities.
It sounds like his entire career prepared him for that moment.
That's actually a perfect way to put it. While other financial institutions were over-leveraged and desperate for cash, Berkshire had this enormous cash pile that Buffett had been criticized for holding for years. People called him too conservative during the boom times, but when the crisis hit, he was like the only guy with dry powder ready to act. And when America needed it most, Buffett became the lender and investor of last resort.
So, Emma, one thing I find absolutely fascinating about Warren Buffett is how someone worth, over $100 billion chooses to live such a modest life. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, right?
Oh my God. Yes, it's like totally contradictory to what you'd expect. Here's this guy who could literally buy small countries, and he still lives in the same house in Omaha that he bought back in 1958 for just $31,500. And it's not like some hidden mansion or anything. It's this totally normal 5-bedroom house on a regular street.
Wait, seriously? The same house since the 50s?
The very same. And he's incredibly proud of it. He's mentioned many times that it's the third best investment he's ever made. What's crazy is that his house is probably worth around $1 million now, which sounds like a lot to us regular folks, but for a billionaire, that's less than 0.001% of his net worth. It would be like someone worth $100,000 living in a $100 home.
His daily routine is equally modest from what I've heard.
Oh, you have no idea. So every morning, he literally stops at McDonald's on his way to work. And get this, he decides what to order based on how the stock market is doing. If the market's down, he'll get the cheaper breakfast. If it's up, he splurges on the slightly more expensive one. We're talking a difference of like $1 or $2 for a guy worth billions.
That's incredible. What about his office? I imagine it's pretty fancy.
Not at all. His office at Berkshire Hathaway headquarters is super simple. No computer on his desk. For the longest time, he used this flip phone that probably cost $20 until he finally upgraded to an iPhone just a couple years ago. And you know what's on his bookshelf? Baseball books and company reports? That's pretty much it.
It sounds like his whole lifestyle goes against what we expect from billionaires.
Completely. And his car choices were super modest too for years. He drove an old Cadillac forever and only upgraded because his daughter told him it was embarrassing. But my favorite thing is his addiction to cherry Coke. He drinks like 5 cans a day. He loves it so much that in China, they literally put his face on cherry Coke cans, and he didn't even get paid for it.
His personal relationships were kind of unconventional too, weren't they?
Yes, this is actually really interesting. So he married his first wife, Susan, in 1952, and they had 3 children together. But in the late 70s, Susan wanted to pursue her singing career in San Francisco, right? So they actually started living separately, but, and this is the wild part, they remained married.
That's unusual for sure.
It gets even more unusual. Before Susan left, she actually introduced Warren to Astrid Manx, who became his companion while Susan was in California. And the 3 of them had this completely harmonious relationship. They would even send out Christmas cards signed Warren, Susie, and Astrid. Like, can you imagine?
That's not something you hear every day.
Definitely not. And after Susan passed away in 2004, Warren married Astrid 2 years later in a super simple ceremony. The judge who performed the ceremony said it took like 15 minutes total. And get this, Warren was 76 when they got married. I think it just shows how he follows his own path in his personal life, just like he does in investing.
Despite all his wealth, it sounds like Buffett values relationships and simplicity more than luxury.
Exactly. And you know what? I think that's actually part of his success. Like, he's not distracted by the trappings of wealth. He spends his time reading company reports and playing bridge, not shopping for yachts or private islands. His one splurge was a private jet, which he actually named the Indefensible, because he had criticized CEOs for that exact expense.
What a character. It's like his frugality is just baked into who he is.
100%. And you know what's really telling? When his kids were growing up, he didn't just give them unlimited money. He once said, "I want to give my kids just enough so that they would feel that they could do anything, but not so much that they would feel like doing nothing." That really says everything about his values, doesn't it?
So we've talked about Buffett's personal life and his frugality despite his enormous wealth. But there's something even more remarkable about Warren Buffett that I think listeners will find absolutely fascinating: his approach to philanthropy. Emma, what's the deal with Buffett's charitable giving?
Oh my God, Liam, this is probably the most extraordinary part of his story. So in 2006, Warren Buffett made this absolutely stunning announcement that he was going to give away 99% of his entire fortune to charitable causes. Not 10%, not 50%, 99%. It was like the largest charitable commitment ever made by anyone in history.
That's incredible. I mean, we're talking about billions upon billions of dollars.
Exactly. And what makes it even more interesting is how he's doing it. So instead of creating his own massive foundation, right, he decided that the bulk of it, about 85% of his shares, would go to 5 foundations, with the biggest chunk going to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He basically said, look, Bill and Melinda are already doing this work really well, so why should I create something new when I can support what's already working?
That's such a pragmatic approach.
It's so Buffett, right? Like totally practical and efficient. And you know what's also fascinating? The way he structured it? He doesn't just write one giant check. Instead, he gives a portion of his Berkshire shares each year. And there are these specific conditions, like Bill or Melinda Gates have to be actively involved in the foundation. And the foundation has to give away an amount equal to Buffett's annual contribution, plus 5% of its net assets.
So he's applying his business mindset to philanthropy as well.
100%. And in 2010, he took it even further when he and Bill Gates created what they call the Giving Pledge. It's this incredible initiative where they ask billionaires to publicly commit to giving away at least half of their wealth either during their lifetime or in their will.
Half their wealth? That's a huge commitment.
It is. And you know what's amazing? More than 200 of the world's wealthiest people from over 25 countries have signed on, including people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Mackenzie Scott. Together, they've committed to giving away over $500 billion. I mean, that's world-changing money.
When you think about the scale of that, it's just mind-boggling.
It really is. And what I find particularly powerful about the whole thing is that Buffett has actually totally transformed how the ultra-wealthy think about their money. Before him, there was this sort of like this assumption that you'd leave most of your wealth to your kids. But Buffett has been super clear that he thinks that's a terrible idea.
Why does he feel that way?
Well, he's talked about how inherited wealth can be a real burden. He once compared leaving massive amounts of money to your children to choosing the 2020 Olympic team by picking the eldest sons of the gold medal winners in the 2000 Olympics. He believes it creates this sort of dynastic wealth that's bad for society and probably not great for the kids either.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
Yeah, and as of today, Buffett has already given away over $50 billion to philanthropic causes. That's more than most people can even comprehend. And the incredible thing is, he's still going. Every year, he gives away more Berkshire shares. His kids do have foundations: the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, the Sherwood Foundation, the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, and the Novo Foundation. But he's been crystal clear that they won't inherit his vast fortune.
It seems like he's really setting a new standard for what it means to be wealthy.
Absolutely. And you know what? Behind the billions, listeners should know that what makes Buffett's approach so revolutionary is that he's not just giving money. He's changing the entire conversation around wealth and responsibility. He's basically saying having this much money isn't just about me, it's about what good it can do in the world. And that's a really powerful legacy that goes way beyond just the dollars and cents.
Now, let's move on to something that I think is super valuable for our listeners: Warren Buffett's business wisdom. Emma, for all those people who aren't billionaires but still want to apply some of Buffett's principles to their own lives, what are some of his most practical insights?
Oh my God, this is actually my favorite part to talk about because Buffett has this incredible ability to distill really complex financial concepts into these simple, actionable pieces of advice that anyone can use. It doesn't matter if you're managing billions or just trying to save for retirement.
What would you say is his most fundamental principle?
So I think the most important one is definitely his approach to reputation. Buffett has this famous quote where he says, "It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently." And he really, really lives by this. He's always talking about how he wants Berkshire managers to prioritize reputation over profits.
That's such a timeless piece of advice.
It totally is. And it applies to literally everyone, right? Whether you're running a massive company or just starting your career. Another big one is his thoughts on opportunity. He says the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything.
I love that. It's about focus.
Exactly. It's about being super selective with your time and your investments. And related to that is his circle of competence idea. He's always saying, know your circle of competence and stick within it. Basically, don't invest in stuff you don't understand, which sounds obvious, but like so many people ignore this advice and end up making terrible financial decisions.
That makes so much sense. What about his approach to reading? I've heard he's quite the reader.
Oh my God, yes. Buffett is absolutely obsessed with reading. He spends like 80% of his day just reading annual reports, newspapers, books, everything. He once said, read 500 pages every day. That's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest, which is, something most of us can't actually do, but the principle is super important.
The idea of treating knowledge like compound interest is brilliant.
Right? And speaking of compound interest, that's another huge Buffett principle. He calls it the eighth wonder of the world. He's always emphasizing patience and the power of letting your investments grow over time. He's like, someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago.
I think that long-term perspective is what sets him apart from so many other investors.
Totally. And you know what's also really practical? His advice on debt. He absolutely hates credit card debt. He says, if I borrowed money at 18% or 20%, I'd be broke. So he advises everyone to avoid high-interest debt like the plague and to live well within your means.
That's something everyone listening to Behind the Billions can apply immediately.
Absolutely. And finally, one of my personal favorites is his attitude toward mistakes. He admits when he's wrong, learns from it, and moves on. No ego. He says, in the business world, the rearview mirror is always clearer than the windshield. I think that humility is something we could all use more of.
So, Emma, as we wrap up this episode of Behind the Billions, I'm really curious about your thoughts on Buffett's lasting legacy. What do you think people will remember about the Oracle of Omaha 100 years from now?
Oh, that's such a good question, Liam. I think his legacy is going to be like multi-layered, On one level, he'll obviously be remembered as one of the greatest investors ever. But I actually think his most enduring impact might be this radical combination of extreme wealth creation paired with extreme generosity.
That's a fascinating point. The wealth and the giving away of wealth.
Right, because like the whole giving 99% of his fortune away thing completely rewrote the rules for what billionaires are supposed to do with their money. And when he and Gates created the Giving Pledge, they fundamentally changed philanthropy forever.
Do you think people will still be following his investment principles decades from now?
God, absolutely. His focus on value, patience, and simplicity, these are like timeless principles. The markets will change, technology will evolve, but understanding the intrinsic value of a business will never go out of style. It's just math and human psychology, right?
Before we go, what's one Buffett principle you think our listeners should take away from this episode?
I'd say find your own investment temperament. Buffett's superpower isn't just his intellect, it's his emotional control. He stays rational when markets are crazy. That self-awareness is something we can all work on, even if we're just investing in our 401 KTs.
That's Behind the Billions for today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Warren Buffett, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. We'll be back next week with another billionaire story that might just change how you think about wealth, success, and what really matters in life.